Bashorun Gaa, the wicked prime minister of the old Oyo Empire, Gaa was a descendant of Bashorun Yamba, the legendary Bashorun Yamba. Because of his many war triumphs and the protections he granted the people against the king's cruel and dictatorial rule, he was well liked by his people. The rise of Gaa. During the 18th century, when Alafin Labisi took over the throne from the previous late Alafin Onisile, he nominated Gaa as his Bashorun, the head of Oyomesi, 7 hereditary kingmakers. Bashorun Gaa was a renowned aristocrat and military leader in the former Oyo Empire. The Oyo Empire was at its zenith of greatness, peace, prosperity, and wealth from 1650 to 1750. The empire had grown to its full extent, encompassing the Niger River in the north, parts of the Tapa and Bariba kingdoms in the east of the lower Niger, the seacoast in the south, and Popos and Dahomey in the west. Under Alafin Labisi's rule, the Oyo Empire received tribute from all of these countries, including the Gas and Ashanti. Thousands of provincial officials, known as Ajeles, were established to oversee all of the subjugated territories and report to the Alafin, who prided himself on their grandeur and power. Women, men, and children of all ages chanted his praises. The empire's breakdown and final collapse thereafter accelerated due to internal power struggles. Bashorun Gaa was notable because he succeeded in enthroning 4 kings, deposing all 4, and was murdered by the 5th. The reign of Alafin Labisi. Alafin Labisi is the Oyo Empire's shortest reigning Alafin to this day. He was only on the throne for 15 days. He committed suicide as a result of Bashorun Gaa's pressure. This poor king was elected to the throne but denied the right to be crowned. His Bashorun Gaa grew in power, plotted against him, and murdered all of his pals. When Labisi was no longer able to dominate, he committed suicide. The reign of Alafin Awanbioju Gaa crowned Prince Awanbioju after Labisi's death and demanded homage from him. Bashorun Gaa demanded that the king prostrate before him 130 days after his installation. When the king refused, he was assassinated. The reign of Alafin Agboluwaje. Following the death of King Awanbioju, Agboluwaje was appointed Alafin of Oyo. He was a tall and attractive prince who steered clear of any confrontations with Bashorun Gaa. Bibi was chosen by King Agboluwaje to remember the Oyo Empire's serenity and harmony. Elowi Odo, a Popo king and personal friend of Alafin of Oyo, came to visit because of the Bebe celebration. His realm was centered on the seaside, giving him access to high-end European manufactured apparel and goods, which he enjoyed with Alafin. The Bibi festival was akin to a jubilee, or a celebration of the king's reign's golden period. This once-in-a-lifetime event lasted 3 years. Everyone, rich or poor, high or low, had the freedom of speech and expression throughout the celebration without fear of being accused of sedition or treason. There were no riots or controversial behavior during the festival's 3-year run. No one was brought to justice. However, the Bebe festival was always accompanied by 2 human sacrifices to each previous king, starting with Oduduwa and going down. As the highest degree of worship and thanksgiving, several animals were slaughtered for the king and his consorts to dance on. The Bebe is also termed IKU, or burial rituals, since it intended to mark the end of a lengthy reign, from the fact that the few kings who celebrated it died a short time later. Explained by Samuel Johnson. Elowi Odo was given a lavish reception at Bebe festival, and the Oyo populace were envious and enraged because he outdressed their king. Everyone is allowed by custom to appear at Oyo during Bebe in his best, King Agboluwaje had pleaded. How much more should a king do? Bashorun Gaa was likewise inconsolable over the affair, despite King Agboluwaje's entreaties. His behavior in this case is forgivable, and as a result, it should be overlooked. But Gaa was unconcerned, and he waged war. Elowi Odo crossed the Eswagbo River and fled to the Tapa nation after being warned. King Agboluwaje, unaware of his friend's brief escape, poisoned himself and died before his envoy returned. The reign of Alafin Majogba. After Agboluwaje's death, Majogbe ascended to the throne. He was determined to rid himself of the terror unleashed by Gaa, who was powerful and influential. He bolstered his defenses with charms. However, Gaa's control over the empire's operations was unrivaled since he appointed his sons, friends, family members, and cronies to run all important large towns, and all tributes from those countries and environs were paid directly to them instead of the king. All of Gaa's appointments were brutal and tyrannical toward the people, leading to defection and the loss of public support that he had previously enjoyed. Gaa and his progeny took over all governance, leaving the monarch in perpetual anxiety, knowing that his fate was in the hands of Bashorun. He succeeded in poisoning Gaa after repeated nocturnal attempts on his life, and Gaa became handicapped in both legs, but the public was unaware of this. Majogbi died when one of his sons was embroiled in a scuffle in one of Gaa's towns. Bashorun Gaa was so furious that he decided the king would have to pay the price for his son's transgression with his life. The reign of Alafin Abiodun. Through the assistance of Gaa, Abiodun was placed as the new Alafin of the Oyo Empire after Majogbi's death. He was a tall, skinny man with a dark complexion. He was a modest and attractive man. Every morning he would go to Bashorun Gaa to offer tribute, for which he would be rewarded with gifts. According to the Reverend Samuel Johnson, even the Bashorun himself was becoming bored of this abject subjection and sought but a reasonable pretext for which he may kill him simply for a change. King Abiodun continued this for many years. "Who taught this king to be so wise?" this man of blood was often heard saying. "These daily presents are getting to be too heavy a charge on my exchequer now." When Alafin Abiodun's only daughter was murdered, Agbarin, he became desperate to kill Bashorun Gaa. Bashorun Gaa was believed to be in need of a deer, Agbarin, and when he couldn't find one, he ordered his men to murder Alafin Abiodun's daughter, Agbarin, because they had the same name. Alafin Abiodun, enraged and devastated, secretly convened with the Onikoyi and the then Areona Kakanfo, Oyabi from Ajasaland, to plan how to send Gaa to his grave. Bashorun Gaa had fostered terror in the people of Oyo Ile, but Alafin Abiodun and his co-plotters were able to extinguish it. They also incite the people's wrath against Gaha, whose popularity and power had begun to diminish due to his paralysis at that period of time. The fall of Gaa. For the very first time in Oyo history, the imperial army's Areona Kakanfo marched with his forces to the Oyo Empire's capital to put an end to Gaa's tyranny. Attacks were launched against all Gaa children in those kingdoms in 1774. Only a few of them were able to flee to satellite countries. Oho Agunbanbaru bolted for the Bariba homeland. They persuaded Olubi, Gaha's brother, to turn against him by promising to bestow him with the Bashorun title. The invaders, headed by Kakanfo Oyabi with King Abiodun by his side, arrived in Oyo Ile with soldiers and were met with a fierce fight by Bashorun Gaa and his army. After several casualties on both sides, the invaders finally won and seized Gaa, who was terribly humiliated, and all of his pleas for his life to be spared were ignored. He was chained to a stake in Akasan market, and Alafin Abiodun commanded that each villager cut a pound of flesh from his body and throw it into a massive fire in front of him. He was forced to smell his own flesh. His nose was not allowed to be sliced, and flesh from his left chest was also forbidden, to prevent him from dying quickly. He died slowly as he begged for mercy, but his cries went unheard by the enraged citizens. To prevent reincarnation, his remains were later burned in a fire. This marked the beginning of the Oyo Empire's loss of military prowess and grandeur. The disintegration of the Oyo Macy after Gaa's murder, which was supposed to function as a check on the Alafin but instead became his puppet, leaving him with total authority to run the empire, reduced the empire's military and political strength. Second, after Gaa's death, the old Oyo Empire experienced political upheaval, prompting certain kingdoms under her rule, such as Dahomey, to declare independence.